And now, it's time for the Stain Game with your host, the one and only Justin Menezes.
All right. Hey, everybody. This is Justin with the Stain Game. And today we have a special guest, Kenny Dugan, the Stain Man himself, is here with us. Kenny, would you like to introduce yourself to those who are watching or listening?
Well, yeah. Like Justin said, my name's Kenny Dugan, owner of Stain Man out of Dallas, Texas. Um, we do wood restoration, mainly fences, decks, pergolas, any exterior wood restoration. I've been doing it for, gosh, what's it now? 21 years, 19 full time. Um, yeah, that's me. What all do you want to know about me? I could go on forever, Justin.
Well, that's all right. And I'm sure everybody would love hearing what you have to say because you are kind of the mentor. I think that everybody reaches out to when there's a problem, either with cleaning, chemicals, stain, wood species, you name it. It seems like I see your name getting thrown around there more often than anybody that I know. And so
I,
you are
I
definitely an
appreciate that.
asset to the community.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I've had a lot of mistakes or done a lot of mistakes and mess ups, so I uh I think I help by telling people what not to do
Mhm.
as opposed to telling them what to do. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I always try to tell folks that when they ask, for advice, it's like, look, I'll give you what I found that works for me. It may work for you, it may not work for you. In the military, I learned early on a saying called "It's a way, not the way," and it's just a tool to put into your toolbox so that if you want to use that tool, use it. If you think there's another tool that you can use that will better the situation or help you with what you're doing, by all means, use whatever you think is best for you.
Yeah, I've found that out. Everybody has a different way of what is it? There's more way than skinning one way than skinning a cat, and
Mhm.
everybody has a different trick, technique, process to do it. And everybody seems to be successful. I've seen companies that are successful that do things just the opposite of I do. So it's as long as you uh, you know take that route, and as long as it's successful, I mean, you can tweak and modify certain things, and help you out. I had a conversation last week with the gentleman who he he had his process down. He just wanted to learn a few different things to be more efficient at stuff. And so some little things that I kind of told him what I did, and
Mhm.
he jumped on it and running with it. And so yeah, everybody has their own. You do things different than I do, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I try to teach by experience and not by what I read in a book or online, or what I heard somebody tell me once. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you're down in Fort Worth, Texas area, is that correct?
yep, Dallas Fort Worth.
Yeah. And so I'm up in the Omaha area, and obviously two different regions of the country, two different climates to deal with.
Yep.
So here in Omaha, there are very few people who will use SH for cleaning because it doesn't seem to just cut it when it comes to wood cleaning, with wood
Yeah.
restoration for fences, decks. You have to use a much heavier percentage of your SH compared to what you're probably using down in Texas and in the South. And so
Yeah.
here,
So
sodium metasilicate is the go-to because it works and it's efficient compared to SH. Whereas I tend to see a lot of folks in Texas who depend on SH for all their cleaning and not the
yeah,
sodium metasilicate, which is it's fine. It works. It does what they're wanting it to do.
yeah. Yeah, it works as long as you don't misuse it. And so down here in Texas, that's the way everybody is taught, is and it's a low barrier entry to fence staining. And to make it that, a lot of folks teach just use bleach, just use it.
Mhm.
Now, when I first started, it was I'd see folks throw straight 12.5% on a fence, spray it on, walk away, come back and stain it. There's actually some companies down here that spray straight 12.5% on in the morning, go grab lunch, come back and stain in the afternoon.
Mhm.
Um, it's yeah, down here in DFW and Texas as well, and you'll see it several other locations. I think Florida and a few other spots. A lot of the folks wood restoration is done with bleach, and like you said, there's nothing wrong with it as long as you don't misuse it. And spraying straight 12.5% onto it, you're misusing it. I use a lot of bleach, but I use it in my maintenance programs.
Mhm.
So I'm spraying maybe a 0.5%, 1% onto the fence. I'm not trying to remove pigments or clean dirt off or clean pigments off. I'm just killing organics. And SH, if you use it for that reason, it's perfect for something like that. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I use a lot of metasilicate and oxalic acid. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
bleach. Bleach
Yep.
in some industries are king, but I don't think. I mean, like you said, it's another tool in your arsenal in your toolbox. So.
Mhm. Yeah. So, do you mind discussing what you see as like a misuse of bleach, or what you would categorize as a misuse compared to the proper use?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, a lot of folks just spray the bleach straight on. They'll come in and sometimes they'll cut it in half. Have a 6.5% bleach and spray it on there, and then they just leave it. And what that does is it eats away at the wood fibers, and it's not gonna. You're gonna have people on both sides of the aisle arguing about it. It's your fence isn't going to fall down, and you're absolutely right. It's not going to fall down, but it does deteriorate the wood enough to where, and it's noticeable for me when I go back and spray stain on it. I can tell the difference if I use too much bleach or not enough bleach, or I should have used metasilicate. But an example, like I said, is you just spray the bleach on and walk away. If you see that dramatic um, color change in the fence, you're probably overusing bleach. A lot of folks like to see, and a lot of videos that you see out there on TikTok, Facebook, wherever, you see people spraying bleach on, and it's an instant change, and everybody's like, "Wow, it's cleaning it up," and it's really not cleaning it. You're killing the organics, and bleach oxidizes any color that's on there. So um, it's just that dramatic. And for video, it's perfect for video.
Mhm.
Everybody likes drama, and so when they see that instant change in color, it's like, wow, this is a great video. When in reality, it's not. Generally, what I tell folks is if you spray bleach on there and there's a dramatic change or a quick change in color, you probably went a little too hard or heavy on it. So back it off a little bit. When I spray bleach on, especially with my maintenance, you don't see a change in color for, gosh, 5, 10 minutes. Um, and that's I don't want to say that's what you're shooting for, but you want it to take a little bit of time from when you apply your bleach onto a fence before it starts changing color. Um, that's an example of overuse. The other thing is not neutralizing your bleach. Bleach or sodium hypochlorite. If it's left on any surface, it'll rust it. So like your steel post, we have a lot of steel posts down here, and a lot of fences you can tell that if it's been bleached before, because your galvanized steel posts that are normally shiny silver are all rusted out.
Mhm.
Your hardware's rusted out, and that's generally a sign that the fence had been bleached out and wasn't neutralized. So you want to neutralize it, whether that's rinsing like crazy. Um, so you can neutralize a fence just by rinsing it with water. It's the same thing as as treating a water well. You pour a little bit of bleach down a water well, it's going to kill your organics down in there, your bacteria that's down in there, and then you flush it out. And I don't want to say you neutralized your well, but you basically flushed it out. So you can do that with straight water. You just have to apply more water, and it's going to take a little bit of time. You can do it with oxalic acid, and you can use something like sodium thiosulfate to neutralize it. Sodium thiosulfate doesn't neutralize the sodium part of sodium hypochlorite. It neutralizes the chlorine of it, and so it kind of stops the whitening process of it. And I had a conversation with an individual who never heard of sodium thiosulfate, and I had to go through, okay, it's going to neutralize your chlorine on it. So when you spray it onto a fence and it starts whitening up, if you spray or bleach onto a fence, it starts whitening it up. If you spray that thiosulfate onto it, it's going to stop that process. Now there's still going to be salts into it. So if you have, a vegetable garden below it, you're probably going to have some issues with it because now you got a lot of salt in the soil. And so you kind of got to neutralize the salts. And you can do that with stuff like gypsum or salt neutralizers. They do make products out there that neutralizes both the salt and the sodium thiosulfate. It's in plant washes and stuff like that. But things like that are where people are overusing or misusing bleach. So anytime I recommend somebody using bleach, neutralize it or rinse like crazy. So
Yeah. I did an experiment a few years ago. I think it was Ray Garcia. I don't know if that name rings a bell. He tends to show up in a lot of washing groups, staining groups. He tends to be Mr. Negative, at least my personal experience. And he was criticizing why I was, wasting money and time with sodium metasilicate and why I wasn't using bleach. And he sent me one of his videos where he overapplied SH. And like you mentioned, it was a very gratifying video to watch, this dark gray fence with a lot of organic growth on it all of a sudden go to a very white-ish looking. I'm not sure if it was actually cedar, if it was pine, or what the species of wood was. But like you said, it was very neat to watch. Like, wow, that happened really quick. And so I told him, I was like, I'm doing this process because it works for me, but I will give, SH a try. And so we had a customer that I told her ahead of time. I was like, hey, I'd like to try a different cleaning product on a portion of your fence if you're okay with it. And I think I was using, I want to say 4%, maybe less than 4, nothing more than higher than 4. And the first thing I noticed immediately for me personally was the smell of the chlorine or the smell of the bleach. And then the second thing that I noticed was the customer who knew we were in her backyard washing. She was up on her deck and she noticed it. And it wasn't really windy, but it was just noticeable. And so she asked me, she's like, are you spraying bleach on there? And I was like, well, no and yes. It's a way smaller percentage. And it's not just pure bleach and da 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 da. And we had already washed 3/4 of the fence with metasilicate and oxalic as a neutralizer after applying it, letting it dwell, washing it, rinsing it, applying the oxalic, letting it dwell, and then rinsing. And she made the comment immediately. She's like, I don't want you using whatever you're using now. I want you going back to the other stuff. And so we had already applied it on that one portion that we wanted to. Ensure we're not going to use it anymore. But again, I mean, it wasn't very strong. That was Ray's comment to me. Well, you're not putting it on strong enough. And I'm like, well, according to you, I'm not. But according to the customer, it was way too strong. According to my lack of smell that I already have from all the years of dealing with other chemicals, it was strong enough that I could tell it was there. And then my second observation was it wasn't really doing anything that I could personally see right away to make me think, wow, this is a great solution to efficiency or making things quicker and faster. And then I did notice that the longer I allowed it to sit, that it was harder to actually clean up, and it would come up um, almost like cotton balls,
Yep.
and it left like a weird, I wouldn't say sheet, but like a layer, um, like wet cotton balls, from
Yep.
all
Like lint.
the fibers that came off of that wood that it basically either killed or lifted to the surface.
Yep. So that's your wood fiber. I call it wood lint. But
Mhm.
and I don't know if I showed you that one experiment that I did where I took all the cleaners and I put a stick of cedar in each one, and I
Mhm.
let it set overnight and pulled it out the next morning. And the stuff, the boards that I left the uh, in the bleach was kind of translucent. It had lost all its color. It was all white, and it was real soft and spongy and pliable. And when it dried out, I mean, it was just pitch white.
Mhm.
And so it's, like you said, it basically ate away at the wood fibers and left a lot of that lint that came off to it. And so if it's too heavy, that's basically what you're getting. You're creating wood pulp is what you're doing.
Mhm.
Um, it's bleach is used in the paper making industry, and that's one of the chemicals that they use to make that stuff. So
Yeah.
it breaks down the lignin in the wood fibers. And now if you're just spraying it on and rinsing it off lightly, you're not going to get that 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 lint or
Mhm.
cotton balls like you had mentioned. You're not going to get that, but it once you put pressure against it, you're going to see a lot of that. And so that was the experiment that I done. And what was the other thing I was thinking of? Oh, um, when you had mentioned that it turns it white,
Mhm.
um, there's a technique that I use, and it's based off of what color of stain am I going to use when I come back to that project. And before when I used bleach all the time, I used to tell clients, we're going to apply this bleach on or SH onto it, and it's going to make it completely white. We're going to have a white canvas to work on, right? And so then we could do any color that we want. And what I was finding was when I was putting stain back onto it, I'd use a lot of stain just to get the color that we wanted. And what I found was it's harder to make a white surface brown with brown stain than it is to make a brown surface brown with brown stain.
Mhm.
So the longer you can keep, or the more you can keep that piece of wood its natural color, the less stain, the easier it is to stain. And so that's why when I'm doing a clean, not a maintenance wash, but a clean, I'm going to use sodium metasilicate or hydroxide to clean that, so I still have that background that's still brown. So the brown tones mix better with it. The only time when I'm doing something like that is when I'm going to go back with a gray surface or a gray stain. I want a white surface because now my gray stains don't have to fight that brown undertone. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah. No, no, I agree.
So it's it's you'll use less stain if you use the right cleaning product, if that makes sense. And it's I found that when I switched over to the metasilicate years ago, that I'm not using quite as much stain as what I used to. I don't have to really flood coat it twice in order to get the color that we want. So,
Mhm.
uh, but and on the opposite side of that, when I was doing grays, when you apply a gray one or a gray stain, and then all of a sudden it turns brown again, and you're like, you got to apply another coat until you get it. I found that if I bleached that out and got it white, my
Mhm.
grays came out much nicer. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
No,
you can get that
I
same effect.
agree.
You can get the same
Yeah.
effect with sodium carbonate.
Mhm.
Get that white to it, and using your oxalic acid. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of the conversations that we have quite a bit with customers when they're trying to. Um, so, like we buy our stain from Expert Stain and Seal, and they have their most typical colors like Wood Defender has, Ready Seal, Bear, Pittsburgh, you name it. Everybody's got a version of cedar. Everyone's got a version of honey,
Yeah.
chestnut, rustic. Sherwin-Williams calls theirs, I think, rustic brown, which is compared to the chestnut. And you got your pecans. The pecan for Expert Stain and Seal may be a different name, but it's the same look for Wood
Yeah.
Defender or Ready Seal, Baker's Gray, whatever stain you're using, TWP. But I've noticed with customers, they'll have a brand new cedar deck, and if it's Western cedar, it tends to have more of that white that you were talking about compared to I'm sorry, an Eastern cedar has more of the white look to it. The Western cedar has more red undertones to it. And so when they sit there and say, "Hey, I want something that's close to the wood look that I have, but I like the gray," and I always try to inform them or educate them, and I'll bring a sample piece of wood, especially if they're not really listening or believing what I'm trying to tell them. That when you put that gray on that red undertone, it's going to bleed through. That gray is not, it'll look gray, but eventually you'll start seeing the red undertones compared to
Yep.
the Eastern cedar that has more of a white undertone to it. You don't see those tones blaring through, and vice versa. If you're staining, honey, which is more of a yellow look that we get, on top of that reddish undertone in that wood, it's going to look a little different at first, and typically it grows on folks, but just informing them, and I think that's great information with the white background compared to the brown and what you're trying to achieve. If
Yeah.
that makes sense too.
Yep. Yep. And so, and like you mentioned on new decks, the stain's going to come out a little bit different on newer decks than it is on older decks. Your older deck's going to hold on to that pigment a little bit better. And
Mhm.
so it's hard to make a sample and give to a client and say, this is what your deck's going to look like when it's a 5-10 year old deck, because you're putting it on a new board. I also found that when I make my wood samples, let's see if I got some here, kind of give you an example. When I make my wood samples, this is a dark pecan wood sample. And if I'm going to make a wood sample for a deck, when I dry this wood sample, I need to dry it this way
Mhm.
instead of drying it up. And when I do fences, I need to do the wood sample this way. And it's because all your pigments are going to run down. If you put it this way and hand this to a client and say, this is for your fence, it's going to be darker than what it was this way. And so the that's one of the hard things. And I actually, on my wood samples, it says, let's see, what does it say here? Wood colors only approximate the actual color. Colors may vary depending on type, age, color, grain, texture, and condition of the wood. These
Mhm.
samples are done on new Western red cedars. And so you have to put that disclaimer on there saying, this is the ballpark of what you're going to get. But then you, like you said, you have to explain you're going to have your orange undertone or red undertones or white undertones. And if we're trying to throw gray onto that, it's best to, I mean, if they had a board that, a cut off piece of board, you could stain that board and say, okay, this is pretty much what it's going to look like. I had a job that I
Mhm.
did one time. We were trying to match a front wrought iron gate, and I thought I made the stain color sample, but I stained it horizontal instead of vertical, and or when it dried out. And so when I stained it, it matched perfect. I was like, oh, yeah, this is a perfect match. All right. I get there and I start staining this fence, and it didn't match. It was too light. And she was like, yeah, that's not the same color. And I was like, yeah, it's the same exact, came out of the stain bucket. And so I finally figured out what I did wrong was I dried it in the wrong orientation. And that job, I probably went back to that job 2 or 3 times before we finally got the color right. And once we got it right, it was just okay. That makes sense now. So
Yep. No, that happened to me this past fall. We did a custom black walnut for a customer. They didn't want walnut that was pre-made, and they didn't want black. And so we took about a quarter, so gallon and a half of clear, 2 gallons of walnut, and then about half a gallon of black, and mixed it all up together. Had more of that black undertone to it, and still had the
yep,
brown walnut undertones in there. And when we did the sample board, we were doing the fence, and then we were doing the deck. And I just put it on a board and had it sitting upright, and it dried out. Sent it to brought it over to the customer. I was happy with it. The customer was happy with it. Did the fence, and then when we did the deck was noticeably darker. It didn't have that transparent look to it like the fence did. And the wife's comment was that doesn't look, and like you mentioned, I was like, man, it came out of the same stain. Like it's, yes,
yep,
I myself notice it is much darker. It looked more like a sable, semi-solid than it did the semi-transparent brown is what we called it.
yeah,
And so then I had to explain to her, like you mentioned, a board laying flat, the pigments are actually going to go into the board instead of running down the board. And
yep,
she ended up being content with it because after she gave it some thought, the heavier pigment would last longer compared to like a new deck where the pigment's not absorbing as much into the wood. It's more of a surface laying. And so they wanted longevity. And
yeah,
luckily for us, knock on wood, uh, she she went with the darker look on the deck because in her mind it's like, well, it'll probably last longer than if it was more transparent and the dogs running in and out of the house and da da da. So it worked out. But I was like sitting there going, man, how are we going to lighten this up? It had already been 3-4 days. So it's not like you're going to
oh,
go out there with
when you put maple syrup,
I don't
that's
know.
not going to be.
Maybe this is a misconception that I have. So if it dries 3 or 4 days, very porous wood, so older deck, 5 to 7 years old, absorb the stain really well. After 3 to 4 days of curing, are you able to go back out there with some mineral spirits to wipe that down to lighten that up, or is that pretty
What
much?
Yeah, on those older decks, by the time they set that long, it's I'm going to say it's pretty. Now on a newer deck, you probably could have been able to lighten it up, but
Mhm.
um, all you're going to pull some pigments off, but not enough to really. I mean, on your older decks, they really absorb that pigment, and so it's something like that. It would be just a strip and stain again,
Yeah.
or you could hit it with the metasilicate and oxalic acid and lighten it up some, and then come back on. But what I like to tell folks is you don't want your deck and your fence to match,
Mhm.
because when you come out your back door, if everything's the same color, it's overwhelming. So
Yeah.
I tell them don't match your deck and your fence or your pergola or patio cover, whatever. Don't match them. It's just overwhelming. So offset your colors. Um, and I've done a few fences where they've had like an accent um, fence that was hiding like pool equipment,
Mhm.
and they wanted to offset the colors on those. And I was like, okay, that's probably not a wise choice to do, but it ended up. What did we do? We did. They wanted darker on the accent fence, but it was newer than the back fence was,
Mhm.
and so we did. What did we do? We did chestnut on the back fence, dark pecan on the front fence. And when we were done, they looked exactly the same because the
Mhm.
newer fence didn't hold on to that pigment. And so I was like, well, probably if we would have just sprayed everything in dark pecan, the front fence was going to come out um, lighter anyway. So we would have to hit it with, walnut or something like that in order to get it to show off. But it ended up working out. So
Yeah. Well, and that's So you talked about the samples. If you're new or newer to the industry, or if you've had issues with color differentiations when you're presenting your services to a customer, we've gotten into the habit where we have a brand new piece of cedar, eastern, western, because we'll get a mix of both here in Nebraska, and then we'll have what we call it a midlife deck board that we just get scraps when we're either doing a repair job or doing, we go to a job site and someone decided they didn't like their, here Celebrity Home builds a lot of cookie cutter homes. And so a lot of times
Yeah.
Celebrity Home will build the house and put on a deck. And then about 5 to 7 years after that, the homeowner either gets tired of having the 10 by 10 deck and builds a new one. And we'll typically grab some of that extra lumber from the discard and we'll wash it, we'll stain it so that it gives our customer kind of a more realistic, because 1 to 3 year old piece of cedar compared to a 5 to 7 compared to a 7 to 10 plus year is going to vary quite a bit in color as well as finish. Because when you
Yeah.
wash a 10-year-old deck that's never been treated and that customer sees it wet with the oxalic and it's shiny and it looks like it's brand new lumber from whatever lumber store, lumber place you get, they have that expectation. Wow, my deck's going to look brand new. And then it dries
Yeah.
out. The water is now dry. It's made its way through the wood, and that wood suddenly becomes 3 or 4 shades darker than it was with the
Yeah.
oxalic first hitting it. So giving your
Yeah.
customer that expectation of, hey, your deck's 1 to 3 years old. This is what you could be looking at compared to a 5, 7, 10 plus year, will help you avoid some of those conversations of why it doesn't look like that brand new piece of cedar sample that we get from the stain companies, and why it looks
Yeah.
2 or 3 shades darker. So that will help you
Yeah.
um, avoid some of those issues or some of those conversations.
When I first started out, so the stain that I use has 32 different colors. And when I first started out, I picked 6 or 8 different colors. I forget what it was. But then I did, like you said, I made different samples of different wood. And I had basically a tote that had all those samples into it. So if you had a pressure treated deck that was this age or in this length of age, new, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, cedar, and I had a bunch of those. And the issue, and you've probably seen this as well, the issue I was running into was overwhelming. It overwhelmed the customer. And so now I still carry around, bags of samples, but I have them like on here. Of course, it might be backwards, but it says dark samples. I have dark samples, light samples, medium samples, and gray samples. And so I have 32 different colors, but each one of them has 8 different colors. And so I'll ask them, you want light stain, dark stain, medium brown? What are we looking at? And they'll generally say, oh, we want to go with the darker stain. So they get this bag. It's only 8 colors. I don't give them the grays. I don't give them the mediums. I used to have a big bag of them all, and I get to them, and they're like, holy cow, this is a lot to choose from. And so now it's just only 8. And really, if I pull these samples out, some of the colors are so close together that I mean, pecan and dark pecan are really close in color. Dark oak and let's see, there's a couple of them that are really close in color. And you have to, like you mentioned, you got to really tell them this is kind of just an example. We're gonna shoot for this, but no, if it's an older fence, it's gonna come out darker. If it's a newer fence, newer fences should look exactly like this because this was new wood when I stained it. But yeah, it's things like that are um, some of the things that issues that we run into when talking to a client.
Yeah. What kind of pressure treated wood do you run into down in Texas?
I just picked up some the other day. What was it called? It's a lot of it when it comes out of the um, whatever the mill or whatever. It has a real high green color to it.
Mhm.
Pro wood is what it's called. I think it's called pro wood. I think that's what it's called. But we actually down here, and it's maybe 10, 15 minutes away from me, is a place that does a lot of the pressure treating. So they have the big tanks that they put all the bundles in, and they do all the pressure treating. Um, Most of the decks that we have are not pressure treated decks. They're cedar decks or Ipe. Um, but a majority of them are cedar is what a lot of folks use down here. So same thing goes with fences. A lot of the fences, at least a lot of the fences that I stain are cedar. We don't run into a lot of pressure treated. Um, and it's I don't know if it's because the contractors that I stain for, or if it's, I mean, cedar is king down here. But
Mhm.
generally, when somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I got a pressure treated fence I need stained," they didn't spend a whole lot of money on that fence. They're probably not going to spend a whole lot of money on the stain.
Yeah.
But most of the fences, if you came down here and drove through some of the neighborhoods, it's all 8 foot board on board, top cap, double trim, corbels, the whole 9 yards on steel posts. They're sharp looking fences.
Mhm.
You get into your older neighborhoods, you start getting into your wooden posts and your dog-eared pickets and stuff like that. But your newer neighborhoods are going to be your, you know, board on board fences, cedar fences. So the pressure treated, like, I mean, kind of answer your question. If it's if we get pressure treated lumber down here, it's green, and we got to whiten it up or brighten it up before we stain it. We got to get some of that green out of it. So yeah, it's a lot of it twists. Probably the same issue that everybody has all over the place.
Yeah, our pressure treated lumber here in the Omaha Lincoln area has gone from that slight tint of green to either very yellow from yellow wood or
Yeah,
very green, like what you just mentioned. And it's it's very noticeable. Like I just and again, I think that's a great point that you made with if they're typically going with the pressure treated is because they're trying to cut costs. I mean,
yeah,
anybody can go to the Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, uh, whatever big box store you have in your area, and you can see the pressure treated. Let's say it's $1.50 a picket, and I'm not saying that's what the price is, but in comparison, $1.50 for pressure treated, your cedar's probably going to be about $3.
yeah,
So, like you mentioned, if they're doing a pressure treated fence or deck, and they're having it built, the likelihood that they're going to want to pay um, to properly have it washed, cleaned, and stained. Uh,
yeah,
you're going to probably be negotiating, or they're going to be asking for discounts, or they're or do you give a senior citizen discount on top of a military discount, top of an AARP discount, because they're probably working with a very limited budget, or they're trying to keep things on the cheaper end as much as possible.
yeah,
Have you
yeah.
found anything that works to rid that green or that yellow tint off of there?
So I use oxalic acid will take that off. So when I have a fence or a deck that has that, I will I'll wash it like I would a an older job. So I'll use metasilicate. And what happens is, so when you apply metasilicate or hydroxide, it's going to bring wood tannins to the surface. And so that wood tannin is going to pull a lot of minerals and stuff up to the surface. And then when you hit it with oxalic acid, it neutralizes all that. And so that oxalic acid will take away a lot of that green. I've had boards that I pulled off the shelf at Home Depot, and I've done a few videos or trainings with it to where we cleaned it just like that, no pressure whatsoever. We just applied what I think we used metasilicate. We might have used hydroxide on it. Applied it. It turned it dark. and then applied the oxalic acid on top of that, and it's instantly just gone. So
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
issue is that you're going to run into is you're going to have a lot of moisture in those boards, and so you don't necessarily want it to dry out completely, but you want that surface area to dry out enough to where it'll accept stain. So
Yeah. Yeah. You want to open up the pores of that wood so it'll actually
yeah,
take it in instead of surface laying.
yeah. Justin, I'm going to back up a little bit here and get into the shade.
Yeah.
My shade tree is sorry. I had a job, 3 jobs today, and so I'm kind of out and about, and uh, I'm trying to locate my shade trees. We're having nice weather down here.
Mhm.
It's gosh, I don't know what the temperature is. We're probably close to 70 right now. So, but
Nice. Nice. I think we
how
hit
long do
50
you?
for the high today.
Yeah,
And that's
my
after a
my
week of sub-zero weather. So we're all wearing, well, I'm in
yeah
t-shirts and ready to rock and roll with some shorts after a week and a half of
my
sub-zero.
my sister lives in northeastern Kansas,
Oh yeah.
and she said she had to turn the air conditioner on today.
Yeah. Yeah. We're kind of weird in the Midwest because we can go from 0 to 50 and 60, and you'll get folks who like I mentioned, it was 0, -9 up until noon, 1 o'clock. And now that it's 50, some folks are like, "Oh, it's so hot up," and it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I
Well,
mean, a 50
you
degree
leave the
temperature
house in
change.
you leave the house in long johns, and then you gotta strip down once you get to a job or something. So
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah. So let's talk about some of the. I mean, a lot of folks in the industry know you as kind of the mad scientist, because as you mentioned, you actually do the tests, the trials. You do your own research to figure out what's cleaning, what's not cleaning, the side effects of certain cleaners to other cleaners, as well as your stains. You do color some of your own stains. I think you even make some of your own stains sometimes with colors and things like that. Is that correct?
So yeah, I mix my own stain. I don't want to say I make my own stain. I mix it. I buy in concentrates and I mix it, but I am able to. I have pigments that I'm able to adjust the color on. So if somebody wants say walnut but don't want it quite as dark as what walnut comes out, I can adjust that.
Mhm.
Um, it's so yeah, I don't really make my own stain as opposed to mix my own stain. It's I've had a lot of folks who were interested in getting to that or doing that to mix their own stain.
Mhm.
And when we got to talking, I was like, how much stain do you go through? And oh, maybe 20, 30 gallons a week. How many colors do you offer? 5 or 6. So it's not a good choice. It's
Mhm.
financially it's not going to be a wise decision to do. And that's because when you mix your own stain, you're going to mix 40 to 50 gallons at a time of one color. And you might mix a color and set on that color for a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
So I do enough to where I can do it. It's not saying I don't have any leftover stain. I do have leftover stain, but at the end of the year, I do the Heinz 57 and I pour them all in, and then I do a special.
Mhm.
Hey, we got this color. We're going to call it dark chocolate walnut or walnut whatever, walnut surprise. And if you go with that color, we'll give you a discount on it. And it's just to get rid of that stain. Um, but yeah, it's um, I mix my own stain chemicals. I don't recommend it for everybody unless you have a real good understanding of it. I do mix my own chemicals. So oxalic acid you don't have to do anything with. It's a straight chemical. Bleach, all you got to do is thin it down or uh, lower the percentage on it, which is just adding water. Hydroxide, just pretty much adding hydroxide in the water. Um, my wood cleaner I do mix with other chemicals. It's not just straight metasilicate. And the reason why I do that, and if you decide or someone decides to get into that wood cleaner. So I use the example of my bleach is just going to kill my organics, and so I just want to light. It's for my maintenance washes. I just want to light, 0.5%, 1%, whatever it is. I'm not cleaning a fence. I don't want the pigments to come off. I'm just killing organics. If I'm going to do a strip where I need hydroxide, it's whether it's potassium hydroxide, sodium hydroxide, or whatever it is. I've used the analogy that's like an atom bomb. You're throwing against it, it's going to take everything off. It's going to kill plants and everything. You're basically going back to square one. Odds are you're probably going to have to sand that surface. With the wood cleaner, it's more of a gentle stripper, and in order to you can use metasilicate, and metasilicate will get the job done by itself. But if you look at products like your laundry soap or your dishwashing soap or your body wash or car wash and stuff like that, they're not just one ingredient. One ingredient's only going to do so much, and if you add other ingredients to it, it's going to each one of those ingredients are going to perform a different job. So, for example, metasilicate's going to go in there and it's going to help loosen dirt and kill organics, stuff like that. But then you need to add something that's going to help lift it or separate it or whatever. So my wood wash or my wood cleaner is a mix of different chemicals. Each one of those chemicals are going to have a different job that they're going to do. I add surfactants to my chemicals. And a lot of folks will tell you don't add surfactants when you're doing wood wash. You don't over add surfactants when you're doing wood wash. And it's the same reason why there's surfactants in your laundry soap or your body wash and stuff like that is one, it helps break the surface tension. So it'll help separate the dirt from the wood. It helps lower or decrease evaporation. So when we apply it on there, it'll last a little bit longer. Now, when you're working in the Texas sun, it doesn't matter how much surfactant you put on there; it's going to dry it out real quick. The key is not to put too much surfactant into it. You add too much and you're just going to be rinsing forever trying to get that surfactant off. And it doesn't take a whole lot of surfactant. 1 ounce, 2 ounces per 5-gallon bucket is enough. It's just enough to get in there. Surfactants go a long ways. And what a lot of folks, some folks will use laundry detergent or stuff like that, and they'll use a whole cap full and they'll put in there, and they're like bubbles all over the place. And you just want enough in there to where you just slightly start seeing the bubbles. And I downstream a lot of my cleaning chemicals, and so that's an indicator of me when that comes through. Now, surfactants, and you had mentioned this before when you were talking about bleach and there was a smell. Some of your surfactants you can get that kind of mask that odor. The issue is you have to use a lot of that in order to mask that odor, and you just apply too much surfactant to it. So surfactants are another thing that I make on as well. If you read the SDS sheet, you can kind of figure out what's in a surfactant, and you can kind of take some of those things out. So like with my wood cleaner, I put it's basically 1/4 teaspoon of surfactant into the mix of it. And that's plenty to go with. But I make my own. I think I got some. Yeah, I got some here. So when I make my cleaners, I make them in 2 different sizes. I pre-package them before I go out to the job site, so I don't have a bucket of all my cleaners. I like to use dry chemicals as opposed to wet chemicals, and the reason is when you spill wet chemicals, it's harder to pick those up than it is to sweep up dry chemicals. I had a job one time I was doing where I dropped a bunch of bleach. It fell out of the back of the truck I was on the road. but you basically had this big clean spot on the road. So it was hard to clean. Now, bleach, you can't buy that in a dry chemical, so you have to just be careful when you do that. So I like to use the dry chemicals, and I pre-package them before I go out onto the job site. So I'll use just gallon bags. I'll put 5 pounds or 80 ounces into it, and that makes me 10 gallons of solution. Um, and then I also do, so these are single serving, and these are actually dissolvable bags. So I can throw this into a bucket. I don't have to measure it out. I just grab it, throw it in with a gallon of water. I'm done. Um, one of your podcasts, you were talking about pre-mixing your chemicals before you go to a job. So
Yeah,
like some
yeah.
of your chemicals will dissolve better with hot water. Um, and one of the suggestion I have is instead of mixing your, let's say you need 10 gallons for a job and you pre-mix it at home, let's say it's oxalic acid, so you mix it with hot water, you pre-mix it at home, mix it at double the strength. So instead of taking 10 gallons of product, you're only taking 5 gallons. And then when you get to the job site, you cut that in half.
I see.
So it's
Yeah. Well,
my whole
yeah,
my
go
whole
ahead.
fear is for me to get in an accident and I have 100 gallons of chemical in the back that's all over the road. So when it's in these packages, this is 1, 2, 6 packages. So this is 6 gallons of product in a gallon bag. If
Mhm.
it spills, I sweep it up.
Yeah.
Easy as that.
Oh, yeah. And less headaches all the way around. Because if, like you mentioned, you could sweep it up, throw some water on whatever residue is left over that you can't sweep up, and you're done with. If you have a
Yeah.
large liquid chemical spill, uh, and you don't have the proper safety data sheets to explain what exactly is being spilled into the soil onto the road,
Yeah.
sewer hole might be, or sewer system might be close by. EPA, the state or the county, the city, you're the the legal issues that you'll run into, and you can sit there and tell them, hey, it's just auxilic. But if you don't have anything to document that that's all that's in there is auxilic acid in that liquid that's now running into the sewer waterway of
Yep.
whatever township, city, county that you're in, it's a nightmare. We
Yeah.
the Yeah, go ahead.
You should carry around a binder that has your SDS sheets for everything. Mine is back there in a tote. Um, and it's, yeah, you just, hey, I spilled this chemical, here it is. And
Mhm.
it's not only is it for that, but if, let's say, you had a bucket setting out and the homeowner's dog came out and drank out of it, well, send him to the vet. Here's what was in it. And that way the doctor knows how to treat it or handle it. But you're absolutely right. And there's limits to how much chemical you can carry on your vehicle. I think with bleach, it's like 100 gallons. I don't carry near that much. Um, but yeah, if you have a ton of chemicals, and like you said, if you have an accident or it spills, uh, you could run into EPA, like you said, EPA, county. Everybody's going to come after you. And
Yeah, yeah, it's better to be safe. Yeah, so yeah, I personally, we like to just take, our dry chemical with us, get to the job site, mix what we need, and mix it as we need it. If we know, I think I was talking to Juan about this. If we know that we're going to, fence or deck, and we have hot water, we have the time to do it. We'll pre-mix the hot water with it, and it's already actually in the pump up sprayers, so it's a little safer than uh, just in an empty bucket. Uh, with surfactants, I'll share a story with you that I thought was hilarious. There was a gentleman who, I don't remember the company, but they had overdone their surfactant, and it looked like a bubble bath party going on. And they were doing a patio cleanup, and the amount of bubbles on that individual's lawn like if it was my house, my kids would have been having a heyday just playing in the bubbles. It was that bad. And
Yeah.
I think he ended up putting like 2 cups of Tide detergent along with his SH that he was using to treat the concrete. And it was just bubbles and bubbles. And I was just sitting there going, oh, that poor guy. I mean,
Yeah.
you could shovel the amount of bubbles that was coming off of there. And so, yeah, you have to be really careful with even if you're pre-mixing or if you're mixing at the job site to make sure that you're taking every precaution to one, not to kill vegetation, landscaping, discolor homes, discolor siding, as well as like you mentioned, if a dog, because you may never think it's going to happen, but I'll use Michael Martinez being at a cabin up in the mountains in the woods of I think North Carolina and looking down and seeing a bunch of cub bears nose deep in his bucket of stain.
Yeah.
I think it happened to be a honey bucket. What are the odds that a bear is going to do that? But what's the odds of a cat, a dog, a kid
Yeah.
reaching into a bucket and you've got, a really heavy dose of stripper and it's now burning that kid's hand, that dog's face,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
So just be real careful with chemicals all around.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wise. I mean, of course, first thing you're going to do is say, keep all the pets, kids, people, everybody out of the backyard. Nobody should be back there except for you and your staff or you and your crew. But that's your first goal. But your second goal is you always have to have a what if, um, plan. So what if
Yeah.
I spill it? And there's been contractors who have spilled product on themselves and got chemical burns. And you have to have a what if I spill this on here, and this is the thing I like about sodium thiosulfate, is if I spill bleach on me, I'm throwing some of that sodium thiosulfate on there. And that's going to stop the chlorine. Of course, I'm still going to have salts, but salt is a little bit different than chlorine at that point in time. So it helps prevent a lot of the chemical burns. I have these little things, and I don't know if they'll come in very well. I don't know if that, but what it is you take a water bottle. This goes on the top of it, and there's a bunch of holes
Yeah,
on the inside of it.
shower head, right?
Yeah. So if you just if you get chemical in your eye. So I have a bunch of those, and you just saw how easy they were to get to. It's right there. If I get it in my eye, these things I'm cleaning it, or take a garden hose after it. It's dilution is a solution type thing, and so that's what a lot of your SDS sheets say. If in case of ingestion or on your skin, just start rinsing it with water, and that's your first step is douse it with water and get it off of you as quick as you can. You're still going to have some of that chemical on you, and there's still a possibility of a chemical burn, and so you got to know what to use to neutralize that. And so it's always have that plan, policy, and procedures. And it's not enough. So let's say you have a crew, it's not enough to have a policy and procedure book and give to them, because let's say they got chemical in their eye, they're not going to be able to read that and find, okay, I got to do this. You have to go through a training on that and say, if you get this in your eye, you need to flush it. And we have these on the truck. Grab the hose. The first thing you should hook up to when you get it at the job site is a garden hose, and have it ready around your bucket when you're mixing your chemicals and all that. Have it ready for instances like that if you get it on you, you can just start rinsing it. So, and like I said, it's not enough to have that book in the truck, but do a training. And that's what do we do on rainy days? Well, let's do some safety training, and it's real simple stuff. You get chemical on you, rinse it, and then we'll worry about neutralizing it.
Yeah.
So,
because it's going to happen at the least convenient time. It's going to happen, like you mentioned, having an SOP, a policy, procedure, manual's not going to do you any good if you're trying to read it while you've got stripper in one eye, and it's burning the crap out of you. So it's
Yeah.
painful. You can't see. Your other eye's all watery, and you better hope if you were wearing gloves, and hopefully you were, that you're not rubbing that watery eye with contaminated gloves, and that
Yep.
you know where everything is. We now carry basically a first aid kit for that, and we have what's it called, an anti-burn cream that we put on that we never carried around until the moment came where we got burnt and we didn't have the cream. We had a neutralizer. We had something that we watered it down and then treated it and stopped the burning from continuing to burn. But we didn't have that cream relief to help with the situation. So now I think it's an aloe mix with something else in it. Green slime looking thing works fantastic. If you
Yeah.
run into poison ivy, dark poison oak, if you have a burn, that kind of thing. And I think of our good friend Walt Dennis. If you haven't asked Walt about his foot, uh, be ready for some gruesome pictures because he won't just tell you what happened. He'll send you uh, picture proof of how bad things got. And I think it took him, last time I asked him about it, it took like months for things to correctly heal, if they
Yeah. It was.
ever really did correctly heal.
So I was going to tell you about that story. So an example would be he he got that burn and he called me to ask me what he needed to do. I was busy. I wasn't able to answer the phone. And
Mhm.
I called him back several hours later and he said, "Yeah, I've taken care of it. I had to go to ER." I was like, "Oh, what happened?" "Well, I got chemical burned."
Mhm.
And so it- that's kind of an example of know what to do ahead of time and don't try to flip through the pages or try to contact somebody. You got to go through that training
Yeah.
beforehand. Like I said, it's a real simple training. Really, if you think about it, you just, hey, got a chemical burn. What do I do? You're gonna get wet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And if I remember talking to him, he didn't think it was much at first because I think he just got some in his boot or on his shoe or something like that. And then after it started burning, he just figured, it'll wash itself out, like you mentioned with water and things like
yeah,
that. And it just continuously got worse and worse to where it was too late to,
yeah. So I
well, not
think
too
what
late.
had
Obviously, it got
happened,
taken care of. But
yeah, I
when it
think what
first
would had
happened,
happened was he spilled some dry chemical and it got in his boot. And like you said, your feet are sweating. It broke down and started burning. He was like, "Oh, I can make it through." Threw some water onto it. It didn't do anything, and he kind of carried on. And that's
mm,
one of the issues that we have when we're out on a job. I need to get this job done. I need to get it done.
yeah,
I had it. I did that one time with mineral spirits. Spilled some mineral spirits on my shoe, and it soaked. I mean, the shoe soaked it up, and I got a chemical burn on the top of my foot with just mineral spirits. Um, and after that, now I carry around a couple pairs of shoes because if I spill, of course, I get different shoes on now, but if I spill that chemical on those shoes are done for the day. I'm not putting them back
yeah,
on.
yeah,
And so yeah, I think that's what happened was he got it on there. He added water to it. It didn't dilute it enough, and he wanted to get the job done. And
yep.
so yeah,
Well,
if anybody hasn't seen the pictures, and I don't know if he'd share them or not, but I want to say that went clear to the bone.
yeah, it was
And
it was gnarly looking. Like when he told
and he
me about it on the phone, I pictured one thing, and then when I saw the pictures of it, it was 10 times worse than I had imagined it to be. And yeah,
well, and Walt,
I'll share an experience with you where I tried, or I had some, I think it was stripper, uh, landed on my shoe, didn't think anything of it, and didn't get my shoe wet, and just thought nothing of it. And of course, the stripper, when you add water to it, it now dissolves and it activates. And if you don't neutralize it, it will continue to activate when moisture gets in there. And
yep,
that was one of the things that happened to me was, no big deal. I don't feel any burning. My shoe's dry. and it absorbed into the sole, I think, of the bottom of my shoe. And so every time that shoe got wet, I could feel it heating up underneath my foot. And eventually I just had to toss those shoes because every time
Yeah.
they would get wet, either with sweat, moisture, walking through wet grass, it activated that shoe and it would
Yeah.
start burning the bottom of your foot. And so you really got to be
Yeah.
careful.
It's probably wise to carry some vinegar in your truck. And when something like that happens, you just 50-50 mix of vinegar and water and throw your shoe into it and
Yeah.
neutralize. So
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't have anything in there, I know Caleb at one time mentioned one of either on a show or on a video or one of the standing universities, grab some auxilic and throw it on there if you have nothing else to use. Auxilic itself will burn you. Don't get me wrong, it will burn you.
yeah,
But if you have a stripper that's burning you worse than the auxilic's going to do, at a minimum, you can throw the auxilic on there to help neutralize that a little bit. And then, as you mentioned, start throwing water to water that down. To you have to water it down at a minimum, but have the
yeah, that,
proper chemicals and resources there to treat yourself.
yeah. That's. I mean, I would say use oxalic acid as a last resort.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that, I kind of want to put the disclaimer out there. If you get stripper in your eye, don't put oxalic acid in
No.
your eye. just, just go to town with water. Just
Yeah.
hit it with water, and that's your first step is diluting it with water. Hit it with water. Hit it with water. Hit it with water. And it's not just a spray. It's 15 minutes of
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's putting water on it, and then if you were to do oxalic acid, do a real light dose of it. It's
Yeah.
don't do straight 8 ounces per gallon type thing. It's
No.
basically with your cleaners, a mild acid. So vinegar is a mild acid. A mild acid is what you want to use. And you're absolutely right. And those cleaning chemicals, like you had mentioned, they stick around. It's not just when you're rinse it off, it's done. You can continue to get that chemical burn hours after. And so you
Yeah.
have to, that's why I suggest carrying a bottle of vinegar with you. I got some in the back of the truck here, and it's just pour it. If you get some on your skin, pour it on there. It neutralizes it. You're going to stink for a little while, but that vinegar smell will go away. A chemical
Yeah.
burn takes a long time to go away.
Oh yeah. 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 And yeah, you're right. I mean, if you get something in your eye, do not put another acidic substance in your eye on
Yeah.
top of what you already have there. Water is your best choice. I tried it one time because I got some on my forearm, and I was like, and I could. It wasn't a bad burn, right? So it was like a little mist, and you could feel that burning sensation. And so I sprinkled just a little bit of, like a pinch of salt worth, and just kind of sprinkled it on it, and I could feel the heat decrease, but then at the same time, I could also feel the skin agitate from the oxalic acid
Yeah.
activating on there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, washing it off right away, and 100 to 1 water compared to what you have stripper or auxilic.
Yep.
There's a gentleman who called me up one time and he was like, "Man, I got chemical burns all over me." And I'm like, "What happened?" "Oh, the oxalic acid. It was burning my arms, my legs, everything's burning." And come to find out, this poor guy is allergic to oxalic acid. You know, so
Hmm.
for him, uh, that oxalic acid was like a stripper burning on his skin because
Yeah.
he was having an allergic reaction on top of the acid itself. Because oxalic acid will burn you too if you're not careful.
Yeah. Yeah, when I go to a job site, I have 5-gallon buckets that I fill up with water for
Mm.
things like that. So if I get it on my skin, I'm dipping my forearms into that water when I'm done. It's on the tailgate, um, clean fresh water. And if I get overspray on me or whatever, now the
Yeah,
first step is to use your proper PPE. I try to, but when it's 100 degrees out and you're spraying, the last thing you want to be in is a rubber suit. And so you're
Mhm.
like, I can get this done without it. And of course you can't,
Yeah.
or you should. And so but I do have that 5 gallon bucket of water, fresh water that sits on the tailgate, and it's more for cooling off than it is
Mhm.
for cleaning off. But if I get any chemical on me, it's arms, because it goes all the way up to mid arm. And it's just dunking them in there, and yeah,
Yeah. Water's your friend.
yeah,
At a minimum, at the best, just soak yourself as much as you can, and then
yeah,
have the procedures. It's one of those things that we take for granted that will never happen to us, but it will happen, especially if you're doing this day in and day out. The
yeah.
likelihood,
It'll
I
never
mean,
happen
Walt Dennis has been staining for how many years?
more than
And
me. Probably
yeah,
25. Yeah,
yeah, and then he has an incident like he did that, thank goodness it didn't keep him from walking or having more of a severe
yeah,
effect on him than what it did. But it could have gotten way worse than what he has, and it was already worse than what I ever imagined it looking.
yeah,
So just be
yeah.
very careful. Well, we're running short on time. I did want to touch on one of the things that has been mentioned quite a bit recently is efficiency. And a lot of folks see your videos, they watch your videos, and you seem to have a very effective, efficient way of cleaning fences and then staining fences. And so I just kind of wanted to touch and see what you'd like to share on how you figured out an efficient way for you to get the work done that you're getting done.
So yeah, I've here the last couple of weeks I've talked to a few folks about being more efficient, and a lot of it depends on how your business is set up, really. So I'm a single operator. It's me, myself, and I.
Mhm.
And I don't want to say I was forced to find an efficient way, but I found an efficient way. For me, I found an efficient way of doing my cleans and stuff like that. Um, and I might have mentioned this before. 75, 80% of my cleaning, maybe more than that, is all done downstream. So I downstream all my chemicals, I downstream my bleach, downstream my brighteners. I have a downstream injector that does a pretty good job. It pulls 6 to 1. And when you do all the math on that, if you mix your chemicals up 16 ounces to a gallon, it comes out as if you would have pre-mixed a 2 ounce per gallon mix.
Mhm.
Um, and so you can apply a couple coats of that, but downstreaming for me is an efficient way to do it. You can use a 12 volt, you can use your pump ups. I mean, you have kind of your efficient ladder, if you will. Pump ups are going to be the slower end of it. You can get one of those zero pumps. It's going to speed a pump up. You can go into your 12 volt, and then you can go into your downstream. Downstream, for me, is efficient. I can knock out 1,800 to 2,000 square feet per hour washing that way, and that's both wash and neutralize, or wash and brighten. Uh, that's how that's kind of how I figure my day. So if I have
Mhm.
a 4,000 square foot fence, I'm gonna figure in my travel time and gun time. I call it gun time, but I can figure it's probably going to take me 3 4 hours to do that. Um, as far as um, and so this was a conversation I had last week. They were using pump up sprayers to do their decks and fences, and I was like, okay, and it was the pump up that you actually had to pump up. You can graduate from that and go into your zero pump, which is just hitting a button and it
Yeah.
automatically it does it that way. But jump to the 12 volt, and you're going to see your, whether it's 12 volt from the truck, or uh, however, if you carry it out, or however you have your setup, it's going to increase your time. And it's really not necessarily the unit itself. that's going to speed it up. Um, it's allowing you to, I mean, your chemical is going to be applied much faster. Stain, the same thing. It's much faster. But it's what you can get done in that amount of time that you didn't have because you were wasted pumping up a pump up sprayer.
Yeah.
So 75, 80%, and probably more of my cleaning jobs are done with the downstream. Now I have a remote bypass, which if I wanted to shut off the chemicals, I hit a button, and it's somewhere right here, on off, hit a button,
Mhm.
shuts off the chemicals. So I don't have to walk back and forth from the truck to shut the chemicals off. I just hit a button, shuts it off, and then I go into the rinse. So I downstream my chemical, I apply it, hit the button, rinse it, and then I have to go switch from my cleaner to my brightener. Then I have to go back and I do the same thing. Hit the button, starts throwing chemical out, hit the button, starts rinsing it. And so I'm done. It's like I said, it's 1,800 to 2,000 square feet per hour. I do mainly fences. I probably do 1 or 2 decks a month, but it's all based off of that, and I can convert that over into a deck. So I can clean a deck, 600 square foot deck in 30 minutes. It's real quick. As far as staining, I prefer using the 12 volt. I'll use any machine. So I have an ST250. I have two airless machines. If I'm doing solid color stains or water-based stains, I'm using an airless. I'm not going to use a 12 volt or an ST250 or anything like that. I'm using the airless on that. But if we're talking about stains like Expert and Bakers and Wood Defender and those, I'm using a 12 volt. And it's just, and you have this machine as well. It just speeds up your time significantly as long as you have your 12 volts set up correctly. I've seen a lot of cart 12 volts. I have a cart 12 volt. There's some that are really expensive, $2,000. There's some that are not as expensive. I found the ones that are, and this is the unit that I sent you. It's compact. It runs off,
Mhm.
it's 12 volt, but it runs off a 20 volt battery. So it runs off and I don't have one of those batteries, but a DeWalt or Milwaukee battery. You can put, so those pumps that I run in there is a 1.8 gallon per minute SureFlow. You can run up to 300 foot of hose if you wanted to. I don't suggest doing it, but it, and you probably, if you've used yours enough, you probably realize that it's cut a lot of time off your day getting away from that pump up sprayer. And again,
Yeah.
a lot of these reasons why I do these is because it's just me doing it. I can't send somebody to go switch chemical or go mix chemical or anything like that. And so the equipment has helped me become more efficient. Um, but it's not the only thing. Some of the things that you want to do is, and I talked about this on a post last week, I think it was, is never go back and forth to the truck empty-handed. You're
Mhm.
always taking something. Um, Prepare the night before, so when you get up in the morning, you don't have to pack the truck and forget something. You have it prepared the night before. Little things like that. I have a little over a quarter tank of gas. I'm filling up with gas tonight, so I don't have to worry about it in the morning. I'm going to be a little
Yeah.
bit more efficient there. One of the things that prevents me from doing is going to the gas station, going in and buying something to drink or whatever, lollygagging around. I can get up, go straight to the job.
Mhm.
So um, there's a lot of small things that you can do to become more efficient. It's just a matter of putting those in play and I guess staying on top of those. A lot of times we'll throw something in that's efficient, and then on the next few jobs we don't need it, and we forget about it, and we go back to our old ways. And so it's
Mhm.
once you figure it out, and there's a learning curve to it. So downstreaming, there's a learning curve to it. Um, it's and I think you had talked about this before, where someone had mentioned bleach was cheaper to use as a cleaning product than using your and you said don't waste who was it, Ray had said,
Yeah.
don't, why are you wasting money on these cleaning chemicals? So Jeremy Townsend, you know him,
Oh yeah.
we had a conversation last week about cleaning chemicals, and we figured it up, and the cost difference between using your cleaning chemicals correctly and bleach was like 0.03 cents.
Mhm.
There's not a big difference in the price.
No.
And so it's, as long as you use your cleaning chemicals correctly and you have your setup getting back to being efficient, as long as you have that setup, the hard part is getting the setup correct
Mhm.
and not have to take an hour and a half to get set up in order to save an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was that some of the things that I ran into. So the ST250, great machine. It's if you don't know what it is, it's a spray rig. It has two 50-gallon tanks. It's ran on an engine. It's basically a pressure washer, a belt driven pressure washer that sprays out stain like crazy. And you can knock stain out. You can knock a mile of stain out in no time. The
Yeah.
issue is getting it all set up. And if you set it up the night before, it's perfect. But each one of those things are going to have their cons, and that's for a whole different conversation um, as far as overspray and stuff like that. But um, a lot of the tips that you use for your airless, even with your 12 volt. So a lot of folks are they're scared to use bigger tips like the 1223, scared to
Mhm.
use that tip because they're afraid of all the overspray. And you don't have to go out and you start using that tip right away. When you get to a job that you don't have to worry about overspray, that's where you train yourself on that tip.
Yeah.
And I think you had mentioned this to me before after I sent that machine to you. You were like, this thing puts out a lot of product.
Mhm.
I was like, yeah, it puts out a lot of product, and I want it to because I want to be done with this job. And when you're spraying with an airless versus that 12 volt, you're airless, you're up, down. With that 12 volt, you're running. And
Yeah.
it's the difference is on an airless, your gallons per minute is like 0.6 gallons per minute or 0.8 or something like that. With that 12 volt, you double that. And so you're going at a pretty good pace. The issue is when you get into those tight areas. And now you're going to spend more time because you're going to have overspray. You're going to have more time cleaning up. Well, that's not where you want to train to be efficient. You want to be out in the open, and you're going to train and you're going to get, okay, I know this overspray is going to be 2 inches. I'm going to stay 6 inches away from a wall or something that I don't want to get overspray on. And so you have to train to be efficient in those wide open spaces or go to a class or whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, that's how I became efficient is I don't, like I said, I don't want to say it was out of necessity, but I was tired of spending 9, 10 hours a day doing one job. And so it's,
Mhm.
you pick up on these things. I mean, I don't want to make it a marketing, speech for those 12 volt systems, but those 12 volt systems saved me a ton of time. I don't have to lug around an airless. I don't have to hook up an extension cord or pull out a generator. I
Mhm.
take the battery, plop it in, hook my hoses in, and I'm good to go. So
Yeah. Well, Marshall, if you're listening, I'm not pointing this out to you personally. I think too often folks want a magic answer, magic pill to solve all of our problems. Um,
yeah,
and he and I went back and forth on messages, and I think he thought I was saying one thing, and I thought he was taking it another way. And eventually, when we talked, I think, as you just mentioned, you have to you have to go through the growing steps, the baby steps of making mistakes, realizing. Tom Reber at one of the Standing Seal universities talked about a leaky bucket. And a lot of times we think of the leaky bucket as the backroom expenses that we're not paying attention when we're doing the work, selling and doing all those things. But that concept, like you mentioned, is realizing what can I do to cut back on my time going back to the truck, back and forth, or going to the truck to grab a tip because we didn't think about grabbing the tip. And now you just spent 3 minutes, depending on how far away from your vehicle you are from the job site. You mentioned the 12 volt. When true story, I got Kenny's sprayer and it was a lifesaver for two reasons. We were spraying a fence and it was so dang cold that the airless would not start up. It was that cold. So had we not had the 12 volt system, we would have been screwed because it did not warm up enough. It was like -8. And that sprayer was like, screw you, I am not working in -8 degree weather. So we had brought the 12 volt system with us because there was an area where we planned on trying it out. And we ended up using it for the whole fence because our airless wouldn't work. And as Kenny mentioned, I was used to the airless, going at a gradual speed to where we're putting enough product and we're not over applying, but getting the right coating on there. And so, yeah, with the 12 volt, I'm doing the same motion and I'm like, holy crap, that's a lot of stain, And so then, like Kenny mentioned, he told me, hey, you're used to an orifice this big and you're used to this much product coming out. Well, now double it or even 2.5 times it. And so our hands were now going and we were moving. And like he mentioned, it cut time. And like I've told other folks is a lot of it's figuring out what works best for you. We are all in different, you're a owner operator. I'm an owner operator. Sometimes I have a couple of guys that work for me. Sometimes it's just me. And for us personally, we do more decks than we do fences. Way like 90% of our work is decks, and we do maybe out of 160 jobs, we might do 20 fences. So we do very little fences. We found for us personally, because we've experienced it, we have a technique, we have a way of. It's not even a standard operating procedure because it's all in our heads already. It's like you mentioned, we get to a job site, one guy, one gal, whoever's there, is grabbing a ladder. The other person's grabbing all the tarps. The other guy or gal has got the pump up sprayer with the we call it cleanup treatment that we put on the concrete if there's a patio underneath the deck. And one person's setting up, the other person's laying tarps, the other person's watering, putting the cleaner, laying the tarps, and the other person's already efficiency is already going back to the truck, grabbing the stain, grabbing poles, buckets, whatever it might be. And that comes with time, like figuring out your process and what works for you. Some folks are going to throw plastic up and they're going to mask and they're going to put whatever up and then they're going to spray it. And if that works, if that's how you do it, that's how you do it. For us, we used to do that and we figured out, it's faster to spray it out, but we were spending at the end of the year thousands and thousands of dollars on plastic tape, paper that we were putting up. And that's not including time of actually hanging the plastic and putting the tape up and all that. But we figured, hey, we could save $10,000 on paper, plastic, and tape by hand staining. And we got good enough to where we could do the equivalent of someone spraying without the expense and the time of putting up plastic, tearing it down, and doing all that by hand staining. Now, that works for me. It works for our crew who's been doing it for years now. For someone who comes in, like you mentioned, when I first started hand staining, it took me a whole day to do a deck because I didn't have the technique. I didn't have the know-how of, hey, I can hit the outside from the inside if I lean over because I'm 6'3" and I can reach all the way over, and I don't have to go hit all the inside and then grab the ladder and start hitting the outside. So we learned over time techniques, what works, what doesn't work. A 50-foot hose that comes with your airless sprayer is great. But if you have 100 to 200 foot of airless hoses and your machine can pump out the material, and you strategically place your material before you even
Yep.
start working, so you know, hey, my machine's gonna start here and I'm gonna hit from the edge of the house all the way around to here. So I'm gonna have a bucket set up so I can hit the other second half. You know, a lot of efficiencies come through trial and error, experimenting, and then like you mentioned, just being efficient with your time. Filling
Well,
up the
and
night before instead of waiting.
there's a million different things you can do to become more efficient. And a lot of folks who are just getting into staining or any business, they want that magic answer of how to make a lot of money in a short amount of time. And the problem is you have to go back and say, okay, a doctor went to school to learn how to do certain things. But in our industry, you don't have to go to school. You don't have to go to a university. You just basically jump into it. But you're going to learn, and so you're going to pay for your education by one, messing up. You're going to have mistakes. And I think we went to a training one time, and one of the conversations came up was, how do you avoid mistakes? And my thought process is, and I have kind of a play the devil's advocate on a lot of these questions that get asked, is you don't want to avoid mistakes, because what happens if you make a mistake and it's a big mistake? You don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily avoiding those mistakes. You need to know how to fix those mistakes in an efficient and timely manner. And so it's, a lot of folks talk about what's the best airless spray out there. And, some folks will point towards the Harbor Freight machines or a cheaper machine, which is perfect for somebody beginning, because one, and I'm sure you've seen some videos and been to some of these classes where someone who's never used an airless sprayer gets on that and they're trying to spray and they just look like they're uncomfortable. You have to learn that technique of how to apply the stain, and it's best to start with something, a small spray tip as opposed to a big spray tip, and get your technique down, and you take baby steps in order to get there. You're not going to come out right away starting your business and be the most efficient person out there. It's going to take you 2 or 3 days to do a deck, which is fine. You're going to learn, and you're paying for your education. Well, you're getting paid for your education, as opposed to going to college.
Yeah.
And so that's your first step, is to learn, and you're not going to learn everything right off the bat. You're going to have a lot of mistakes, and you want to have a lot of mistakes. You just need to know how to fix those mistakes. If you get overspray on a house, if you get overspray on a car, overspray on a concrete, whatever it is, if something happens to the machine or your chemical's not working, you're going to learn those by asking those questions. But you want to make those mistakes in order to use that. One of the scenarios that I use, and you've probably seen it on a lot of your Facebook groups, somebody will ask the question, hey, the client wants to use this stain. What do you guys think about it? And every answer you see, don't use it, don't use it, don't use it, don't use it. Bear is an example. Somebody else, hey, customer wants to use Bear semi-transparent, whatever. Everybody's, don't use it, don't use it. It's a bad product. You'll be back next year, blah, 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 blah. And I'm probably one of the only persons that says, use it. Use it. Absolutely use it. That way you don't have to ask this question again. So if a customer says, hey, I want to use Bear, what do you think? Now you're not given the answer of, so-and-so, Justin says it's a bad stain. Well, who's Justin? Oh, it's this guy up in Nebraska. What does he have to do with anything down here?
Yeah.
Well, he just told me it's a bad stain. I'm going to say, use that stain. That way, when the client asks you again, you can say, that stain sucks because I used it and it only lasted blah, 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 blah. Or it might be, it's a good stain. I've done that before where the stain was called Duckback, which is now Sherwin-Williams bought them out, changed the formula. But back when it was duck back, it was a great stain, and I've never used it. And the client wanted to use it. I said, I haven't used it before, but I'll use it, see what it's like. Sure enough, it's a good stain. Um, and so I always suggest make those mistakes, use that stain, get educated, and don't
Yeah.
take. For me, even my advice, it's what I've had to deal with in the past, and so it's my opinion. And so when you ask these questions online of how do you prevent this or what stain or whatever, um, you're not going off the. And some of these answers that you get are opinions based off of opinions based off of opinions. And I think Everett Abrams said it's, how did he put that? Bad it's a bad example of a bad example.
Yeah.
And so you're just repeating what somebody else had told you. There's book smarts and then there's street smarts. Street smarts always wins over book smarts.
Yep.
You can learn. I think one of the questions I was going to ask Joe Everest was, would you rather be wise or knowledgeable? How would you answer that question?
I'd rather be knowledgeable.
Okay.
And
I'd rather be wise.
well, so when I say knowledgeable, I would assume that I have gone through the experiences to speak of that knowledge, right? So
That's wisdom.
What's that?
That's wisdom.
Okay, so maybe I just misunderstood what one was or the other. So I have the experience to speak of. So I mentor some young men typically, and one of the things that I tell them is, hey, I've experienced where you're coming from. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I don't want, when I tell you don't make this mistake, it's because I've made it and I've remade it and I've remade it, and the outcome has never been good. So if I can help you avoid that mistake and help you like one step ahead of where I was at where you're at right now, then I'm helping you. I am not going to lecture you on why you shouldn't do these things without ever having experienced them myself to even know how to speak on it. Right. So last year we used Bear, we used Valspar, Sherwin-Williams, Olympic, Cabot, TWP, Ready Seal, Wood Defender, Expert Stain and Seal. So we used 9 different stains last year. Of the ones that I really didn't want to use, I would always pre-up or not pre-up, but I would have the conversation with the customer is that you have, I don't give you a warranty on any of the products unless I can stand behind the product. So when we typically use Expert Stain and Seal, and we tell our customers you're looking at a minimum of 2 years in between treatments. So if we apply it this year, 2 years from now, you're most likely going to want us to come back. If you get 3, fantastic. But you're looking at least 2 years. With Bear and any of the other products, in my personal experience of using them, I cannot warranty it because I don't know what it's going to do. It does not do what it says it's going to do. And I've witnessed that myself with the application, with the conditions and things like that. So when we have a customer that says, hey, I want to use this product and this is what I want to use. Okay. First of all, there's no warranty on the product, so I can't warranty like I was with the product that I suggested. 2, if it starts peeling, chipping, flaking, doing the things that I've told you why we don't use that product and why we use the product that we're using, you can't hold me accountable to that. We will apply it. We'll stand by our work because I can account for our workmanship. That's something that I have responsibility and I control. Everything else is out of my control. So, and we've had mixed reviews with certain products. We have a job that we did, Cabot Australian oil, that is going on 4 years, and it looks. I haven't seen it this year, but last year we drove by it, and we were doing a neighbor's house, and it looked fantastic. We've had other Cabot Australian oil jobs that we've done where after a year. So if we did it in May, We had our summer, our fall, our winter, come back spring, and it looks like crap. All right.
Yeah.
It's like a toss up sometimes.
Yeah.
But now like you mentioned, I've experienced how bare in 3 months and a Nebraska typical 3 month winter was completely trash looking when spring came. Like it looked absolutely horrific. But had I not experienced that for myself, it would just be, well, I heard on this Facebook group that has what everybody expects to be experts in the industry say that it's a bad product. Well, why do you think
Yeah.
it's a bad product? Well, have you ever used it? No, I haven't. So why do you think it's a bad product? Consumer Review says it's rated #1 in North America, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I would highly. I mean, again, we all have our opinions, we all have our way of doing things. But unless you experience it yourself, you're really not going to know what it's like. I remember the first overspray job that I had, and I thought it was going to be a nightmare. Like I was sweating bullets. Like we're going to have the house repainted. We're going to have cars detailed, if not repainted, right? And went out there calmly, collected myself, took a couple of deep breaths, counted the 10, grabbed a rag, some water, dish soap, went out there and was, the lightly good, didn't want to scratch and it was coming up. And it wasn't as nightmares as I thought it was going to be. Now, each product is different, right? So we use Expert Stain and Seal. If you get to it in a good, timely way, and you clean it when you notice it, and you do your due diligence of, all right, we're finished with the project. Let's look around. Do I see speckled windows up high? Do I see some discoloring on the white hardy board? You take care of it there and then. You don't wait for the customer to see it and then call you and say, I think you got overspray on my house.
Yeah.
We rinse off the house and we'll rinse off the neighbors. And if the neighbor, and we'll let the neighbor know, hey, we're going to be staining the fence. We presume your neighbor did what he said he did, that he's going to let you know we're going to be in your yard. And we're going to wet your house down and we're going to apply our degreaser on there, which is a small amount of Zips orange degreaser with some Walmart dish soap and majority water. So if you see us doing that, just consider it your house is being rinsed. And they typically like it, well, you're going to get all the dust and cobwebs and crap off of there. But taking that precaution and including that into your estimate price also, that you're going to leave the job site. We always use the old Boy Scout model, leave it better than you found it. We don't just say it, we go through and do it.
My motto is, you're not going to know I was there except for a freshly new stained fence or deck or whatever. So that should be the only thing that you see when I leave.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to go at, is the only thing you're going to notice is your fence has been freshly stained. You're not going to see overspray or anything like that.
Yeah.
Periodically we get it, but we strive to prevent all of that. So
yeah. Well, and that goes back to the efficiency part of things. Being faster is not always better than what is it? Slow is smooth, fast is I don't remember the saying now. There's
slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yeah. And so, like you mentioned, if you go in there, you properly clean the fence, the deck, the pergola, whatever you're washing, and you're not leaving residue all over the house. You're not leaving fibers on the windows because you didn't bother to rinse everything because you were in such a hurry.
Yeah.
I got to do this in an hour, so I can be as efficient as possible. Well,
yeah.
I'll give you a personal example. All right. Deck looked fantastic, but when the husband and wife were sitting down drinking coffee, they noticed their windows looked like crap. And they had been freshly cleaned the week before this deck was washed. And the person who was washing the deck did not, in a hurry, I got to do so much work, I got to do this, and did not properly rinse off the house, the windows, like we're supposed to do, like we typically do. So I got a phone call, hey, my windows are full of some kind of substance on it. It looks like cotton, looks like just gunk. And so I came back and I walked up, and you could see it as you're peeking your head just above the stairs. And you're like, oh crap. And so I go back. I didn't even go any further up. Went back out to the truck, grabbed the ladder, grabbed the washer, and started rinsing. And now I've got my squeegee. Now I'm going to go the extra mile of not
Yeah.
just rinsing off, but a detailed clean and wash. Rinse off the deck. But now that fast and efficient, what was considered to be fast, we just now prolong that deck being stained because it's soaking wet, or not soaking wet, but it's wet. So now we're not coming back the day later to stain it. Now we're coming back 2 or 3 days later, and you hope it doesn't rain or something else. And now that customer in my mindset is sitting there going, I wonder what else they cut back on corners. I wonder if the second story windows got something on it. So now they're out there looking, and they're going to look for everything.
Yeah.
And when you stain, you walk through the job, make sure everything's clean. Now they're going to come out and they're going to look. Is that a drip of stain? Is that hey, Justin, you got stain on the house there. And now they're looking everywhere else. They're looking at the cars. They're asking the neighbor. Hey, did you get stain on your house? Did you get stain on your car? So efficiency is great as long as it's done correctly. And
there's a difference between efficiency. Yeah, there's a difference between efficiency and rushing a job.
Mm-hmm.
They don't mix. And so it's what some folks think is efficiency is we're getting the job done quick. And that's not it. Efficiency is doing something in a timely manner, not costing you an arm and a leg. So if we look at car efficiency or fuel efficiency, it's the most amount of miles, the least amount of gas. So how can you do the most amount of fence for the least amount of cost? And time shouldn't be involved in that efficiency, because if you can do a job in, let's say, 10 man hours, but you have overspray all over the place, and like you'd said, and you have to come back and clean that, it's no longer 10 man hours. You no longer are efficient at it. You've created a mess. So it's putting up plastic and stuff like that. Like you had mentioned, you brush things now on decks. I don't, but we don't have a lot of second story decks. Ours are all, ground level decks. So we don't have to really put up plastic. But it's if you can become efficient at, and then folks will ask, well, how do you become efficient at, brushing decks? Well, there's machines or attachments out there that allow you to brush a deck through a airless sprayer or the 12 volt or whatever. So yeah, you can still be efficient and still use equipment at the same time. You just, again, you have to go through that learning curve of how to get there. So
when we bought that 12 volt sprayer, our intention was for staining, and when we applied it using cleaner and chemical, that's probably going to be the majority of use that we're going to have for the 12 volt system, because the pump up time, when you look at if you're doing 3 or 4 washes a day, how much time you're spending on pumping, and then hoping none of the granulars that didn't dissolve get stuck on 2 or 3 of them actually connect and cause a clogging. And now you're taking time, taking things apart, blowing things clean. For us, that 12 volt system with the Flexzilla hose, we can take a bucket, place it strategically, and we could treat a deck with cleaner in a minute or 2, compared to pump, or even with the zero. It sprays it out, but then again, you're worrying about the granulars. And so for us, that 12 volt system has been fantastic because it cut back on wasted time
Yep.
with now just having it spray through, and it's got the filter, so you're not worried about the clogging, the pumping,
Yeah.
the refilling of a 2-gallon. Well, I need 3 gallons, so now you have to take time to unscrew it, put it in more
Yep.
cleaner, add more water, shake it up. So for us, that 12-volt system, just on the cleaning application and auxiliary side, has been an efficient resource for us.
Yeah. So I've gone to the practice of, if it's more than 2 gallons, I use a 12 volt.
Mhm.
If it's less than 2 gallons, because my pump up sprayer is 2 gallons. And so if it's less than 2 gallons, it will run it through the zero pump and go that route. Now, to
Yeah.
get around that granular at the bottom, I mix my chemicals in a bucket and then pour it in.
Okay.
And that allows me to watch. And when the granulars start coming out, that's where I stop dumping. I just don't put those into the pump up. And it's saved a lot. You'll get some in there once in a while, but that's how I've gotten around clogging up those pump ups.
Yeah. Well,
But again,
that's I'll try.
yeah, again, I anything above 2 gallons goes through the 12 volt system. And like you said, that stuff, if you use the right tip on there, you will fly through applying chemicals. So again, you have to be careful not to get the chemicals where it doesn't need to be, but you're absolutely right. It's a game changer. And again, not to market mine, you can build your own 12 volt. Several folks out there have the 12 volt set up, whether it's a bucket top or what it is. I just found that the setup, the ammo can setup that I have, it doesn't tip over. It's compact. If you want to winterize it, take it out of your truck, put it in the garage or wherever.
Yeah.
There's real simple.
Yeah.
So and again, anybody, you can build your own, whatever. I got folks that I've sent units to that, hey, I'm going to build another one. How do you go for it? Go for it. It's not patented or anything. Just do it. It's just, I build them. I don't make a ton of money off of them. I build them, send them out. If you got questions, holler at me. That's the same unit that you have, the exact same unit that I use, and I use it almost daily. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
I
again,
use
I've
it for
got,
both clean. I use mine for both cleaning and staining. So I have two separate units, one for staining and one for cleaning. And it also runs my pre-stain machine. So it's not only for spraying stain and spraying chemical, it'll run a pre-stain machine. So
well, Kenny, it's about that time. I've taken up way too much of your time. Do you have anything you want to leave before we call this quits?
I don't. I mean, if anybody needs to get a hold of me, do I want to give out my phone number?
You have to be careful what you give out. You might
Yeah,
regret it later on.
I think the last time I handed out my phone number, I just got bombarded with questions after one of the universities. But Kenny at stainman.net, you can get a hold of me. I'm on Facebook, TikTok, all that stuff. You can get a hold of me on Messenger. Start with that route. Like I said, Kenny at stainman.net. Website is stainman.net. Start there. Then if I can't answer the question there, I'll hand out my phone number that way.
There you go. Well, I appreciate it, Kenny. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Until the next time, sayonara from the Stain Game.